For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, welcome to March. After a month that served up the likes of Neo 3, Mugenics, Can, and Resident Evil Requiem, March has got some pretty big shoes to fill. Still plenty to look forward to this month, including the absolutely insane-looking Crimson Desert, which I just previewed yesterday. Link to that video below the like button. TLDR, it's definitely a real video game, and it's a hell of a lot of video game to boot. Whether or not all of it earns its place in the package remains to be seen, but I am quietly confident that Crimson Desert is going to live up to at least a good portion of the hype. Speaking of hype, or lack thereof really, I guess we should talk about Highguard. A few days before the release of Highguard, Jeff Keighley brazenly tweeted out that Jurassic Park gif of an overconfident John Hammond. It was, unfortunately, the perfect gif, because while Jeff may have not seen how that movie ended, the rest of us had, and this week the circle closed with the announcement that Highguard is being shut down just 45 days after it launched. This week, the official Highguard Twitter account posted, quote, "Today we are sharing difficult news. We've made the decision to permanently shut down Highguard on March 12th. Since launch, more than 2 million players stepped into Highguard's world. You shared feedback, created content, and many believed in what we were building. For that, we are deeply grateful. Despite the passion and hard work of our team, we have not been able to build a sustainable player base to support the game long term. Servers will remain online until March 12th. We hope you'll jump in with us one more time to show your support and get those final great matches in while we still can." The team is excited to release one final game update to enjoy in the remaining life of the game. We'll be adding a new warden, a new weapon, account level progression, and skill trees. Full patch notes are coming, and we're targeting tonight or tomorrow morning for patch release. From all of us at Wildlight, we thank you for playing, for supporting us, and for being part of Highguard's story, end quote. 3 weeks ago, I led with the video title, "Rip Highguard," and many comments responded that I was being hasty or over-dramatic or clickbait even, God forbid. But the reality is that the writing has been on the wall for this game from the jump. The collapse of the player base was instant. People logged in, they played a few rounds, if that, and then they dipped. The critical consensus was also really middling, pointing to a need for major redesign of core game systems. Technical performance was also terrible, even on high-end hardware, and there was just no reason at all to suspect that this thing would eventually become the thing it needed to be. Except, of course, the declarations of the management, who insisted on multiple occasions that the game had a long runway ahead of it, that it didn't matter if the player numbers didn't hit the required targets, that the team had experience in managing franchises for the long term, yada yada. Fast forward to 3 weeks after launch, and the majority of the studio was laid off, and then skip forward another 3 weeks to the entire game being shut down. Genuinely unbelievable. How exactly we got to this point becomes much clearer when we look at Bloomberg's reporting from earlier in the week, where Jason Schreier spoke to 10 Wildlight employees, providing a thorough breakdown of the game's troubled and misguided development. Highly recommend giving that one a read, by the way. Apparently, prior to the game's announcement, several developers were so confident in this thing that they felt the title would be, quote, "a foundation for grander ambitions to come," end quote, wanting to eventually develop a single-player story set in the universe, looking to Titanfall and Titanfall 2 as inspiration. Safe to say, that will definitely not be happening now. One of the reasons for this bullishness was because of the positive response to early playtests. We've heard a little bit about this in a now deleted Twitter post, where one laid-off employee voiced their thoughts on Highguard's reception, claiming that its failures were mostly a result of a targeted hate campaign, since everyone they invited to play said the game was great. Schreier's report shed a little more light on this. When speaking about the playtesting process, sources say that testing may have been inadequate. You think? While tests came back positive when playing with squads on voice chat, the game was noted as complicated to learn without the ability to talk to other players or have developers on hand. Reportedly, developers had brought up the idea of garnering feedback via public playtests, but leadership rejected those suggestions, hoping to keep the title secret until launch, just as Apex Legends did. That was a common theme in the reporting, actually, as multiple staff made mention of, quote, "hubris," end quote, as one of the main causes for Wildlight's downfall. They suggested there was this ongoing notion that because much of the team had previously worked on Apex Legends, that the success could surely be recreated, which is not how any of this works, as demonstrated by the many other live service failures in recent years with experienced development teams behind them. The report goes on to say that this harsh reality hit them when Highguard was announced at the 2025 Game Awards, as staff say that morale at the studio began to dip after seeing such widespread criticism online. Despite that mishap, staff originally believed that with Tencent's backing, the studio had enough financing to continue working on the title over the long term, but 2 weeks after launch, it was revealed that Tencent had pulled funding, resulting in that mass layoff we heard about 3 weeks ago, leaving less than 20 people on the development team, according to Jason Schreier's report, and inevitably leading to this closure, since there's only so much you can do when you're this short-staffed and sentiment is this stacked against you. Later, weighing in on this whole situation was former Wildlight employee Alex Granner. He was a level designer on the game who previously worked on Apex Legends and Battlefield 6, and he was one of the first to share news of the layoffs. Speaking on the Quad Damage podcast, he suggests that the game's failure is owed to the way it leaned too far into the competitive angle, saying, quote, "You don't strive to create something that doesn't work out, but it happens, unfortunately. Throughout development, we really leaned into the competitive side of it, and that was always one of my biggest fears as a player, end quote. Grainer then went on to mention 3v3, which became Highguard's main play mode, as well as calling out the complexity of the game owing to shifting objectives within each phase, saying, quote, it's like, oh, you want to loot, now we've got to chase this objective, now we have to plant this objective, now it's overtime. It has all these rules, which I think works at a really high level, but when players are first coming in, it's a lot to grasp. On top of all that, because it was 3v3, that kind of game just requires high skill movement and shooting, which is already a pretty high bar to entry as well. So if you just have a few bad games or your teammates aren't sticking together, you're just going to get rolled, end quote. And yeah, difficult to disagree with that. It's always very risky creating games that are exclusively targeting the competitive space, because that audience is extremely demanding with regards to what they expect from that experience. And if you fall short of that, then you don't have the casual player base to help keep the player population alive. Highguard in particular really felt like a game that should have been more welcoming to casual players, and I think the last minute inclusion of a 5v5 mode was about trying to pull in that audience. Alas, it was too little, too late, and the next Concordian catastrophe will have to be numbered 3 or above, because Highguard really did end up becoming Concord 2 in the end. Speaking of failed Sony live service projects, Bluepoint. Jesus, it hurts just to say that out loud, it really does. Jason Schreier had additional reporting on Bluepoint this week as well. He reports that after their acquisition back in 2021, Bluepoint immediately continued its work providing development support for God of War Ragnarok. After that was done, the studio had desires to make their own original title, which would go on to become that God of War live service game that was cancelled last year, a project that Bloomberg rightfully notes as an awkward fit for the studio, given that it doesn't exactly play to their strengths. Schreier goes on to say that the game was apparently centered on Atreus fighting his way out of Hades, and that even after Sony Santa Monica came in to assist, it, quote, spent several years floundering, end quote. After it was canned, Bluepoint then pitched a number of other projects to Sony, including an updated version of their Shadow of the Colossus remake, which is weird, a Ghost of Tsushima spin-off, and this is true, a Bloodborne remake. But, and here's the weird bit, according to Schreier's sources, the reason they didn't go on to make a Bloodborne remake wasn't because Sony turned them down, it was because, quote, From Software didn't want it to happen, end quote. No reason was given as to why they didn't want it to happen, but it's long been known that Bloodborne is particularly special to its creator, Hidetaka Miyazaki, so it's possible he just didn't want anyone touching his baby, and while Sony could have told him to go jump in a poison swamp, I don't think that's the sort of relationship you'd want to strain. I mean, FromSoft is already making a Switch 2 exclusive. You want to really piss them off and see them start making Xbox exclusives? And yes, I'm aware that that term is an oxymoron at this point, but you know what I mean. Adding further insult to injury, workers at Bluepoint were also allegedly unaware of the studio's imminent closure as late as the recent State of Play, where Sony announced the God of War trilogy remake. Like, imagine how it must have felt to see that logo flash on screen knowing that your studio, a studio that specializes in remakes, was not making it. As far as Sony's reasonings behind closing Bluepoint, Bloomberg sources say that, quote, Sony no longer thought Bluepoint was equipped to make its own game and couldn't find a partnership that made sense, end quote. And again, I just find that so hard to believe given the caliber of work this studio was consistently producing. I wonder if we'll ever find out the truth behind all of this, because even with the benefit of this additional reporting, none of this makes any sense. A triple whammy from Schreier this week. The man has certainly been busy, and this week he put out a report that summed up a lot of the chatter that's been happening behind the scenes lately, chatter related to Sony's plans for future PC ports of its single-player games. Lately, a number of industry insiders have been saying that they've heard from multiple sources that Sony was pivoting away from its current strategy of releasing PC ports for its flagship single-player titles 6, 12, 18 months after they first ship as PS5 exclusives. This is a strategy that has met mixed results, since some titles have sold really well on PC, particularly the first God of War game, while more recent releases like Ragnarok, Returnal, and Spider-Man 2 sold far fewer. Schreier said, quote, a faction within PlayStation has also expressed concern that releasing their games on PC risks damaging the console's brand and will hurt sales of the PlayStation 5 and its successors, according to the people familiar with Sony's inner workings, end quote. So reportedly, the new plan is simple. Live service multiplayer games like Marathon and Marvel Tokon still ship multi-platform, but single-player games like Saros and Wolverine are strictly PS5 exclusives. In fact, Schreier reports that plans for the PC port of Ghost of Yotei were in motion, but have since been scrapped, which would make it the first major PlayStation exclusive not to make the jump to PC since Sony set down this path back in 2020. So look, this is a really complex topic, one that we actually discussed at length during the most recent episode of the Frames Per Second podcast. Link to that below the like button. But at a high level, I think this is a bummer. I'm actually firmly in the camp of liking platform exclusives because I think they drive overall platform health and competition. And while it means we may miss out on being able to play some games we want to play, I think the overall result is a far healthier gaming ecosystem built on subsidized hardware and fierce competition for our dollar. Having said that, I do think that being able to play a game a year or two early isn't incentive enough to protect that business model, and that releasing your games on PC way down the track probably doesn't hurt the sustainability of the console business. But honestly, that's just like a gut feeling or a guess, and Sony have actual data and insight to rely on, and they've come to a different conclusion, so I respect that in the sense that they think protecting the console ecosystem is vital, and if this is something that keeps Sony strong just as Nintendo exclusives have kept Nintendo strong, then I can get behind this. I guess the next question then becomes, does Xbox dare follow suit and try to get back into the console exclusives business? I think that's all but impossible, but with the new Xbox boss, Asher Sharma, not ruling that out, while also talking repeatedly about the importance of Xbox consoles, I guess the plan is the plan until it's not. Speaking of which, would you believe it if I told you that Microsoft just announced its next-gen console this week? Well, you shouldn't, because that's not exactly what happened, but close enough. Just today, Xbox tweeted out an animated GIF of a Helix with the caption, quote, "The next generation of Xbox console, Project Helix," end quote. It fell to Xbox boss Asher Sharma to provide some actual detail, which she did in a follow-up tweet saying, quote, "Great start to the morning with Team Xbox, where we talked about our commitment to the return of Xbox, including Project Helix, the code name for our next generation console. Project Helix will lead in performance and play your Xbox and PC games. Looking forward to chatting about this more with partners and studios at my first GDC next week," end quote. So not a lot there, given that we already kind of knew that the next Xbox would be a PC hybrid. The fact that she said it would lead in performance, though, is notable, and it lines up with Sarah Bond earlier saying that the next Xbox would be very powerful and very premium. That should sound some price-related alarm bells for a few reasons. Number one, all hardware is particularly expensive at this stage, as AI capex is driving the cost of memory and storage through the roof, and consoles need a lot of memory and storage. Secondly, Xbox was running the old subsidized console business model to this point, where they eat losses on console sales so they can make the money back on platform fees charged to third parties. But if the Xbox is just a PC and you can buy your games on Steam, and Microsoft doesn't see a dime from that transaction, then how can they justify subsidizing the next Xbox? And if they aren't subsidizing it, will I need to sell both of my kidneys to be able to afford it? We don't know the answers to any of these questions at this point, but the fact that Usher says she'll be speaking with developers about Project Helix at GDC tells me that more news will be coming soon, probably. So stay tuned, I guess. And finally, let's talk Marathon, since that released just a few hours ago. At the time of writing, which is around 7 PM PT, it's hit a peak concurrent player count of around 88,000 people on just Steam. Obviously, that does not include those playing on consoles. And look, that is a sort of number where it can fit almost any narrative that you want to spin up. You want to say that Marathon is underperforming? Sure, compare it to Arc Raiders Day 1. You want to say it's a success? Sure, we'll compare it to Helldivers on Day 1, which only had about 80,000 peak concurrents. You want to pitch it as a battle of AAA versus indie for some unknown reason? Then compare it to Slay the Spire 2, which launched at almost the exact same time as Marathon and currently sits at nearly 250,000 peak concurrents and still climbing. But honestly, none of those comparisons really matter. Marathon is its own game, targeting its own audience, an audience that is, I suspect, more niche than many people realize. It's possible that Sony need this thing to hit 10 million units sold for it to be considered a success or whatever, but it's possible that that target is less, or that the timeline to reach that target is longer than we think. We just don't know, and if Marathon had reached 500,000 concurrents on Day 1, then that is a slam dunk, smash hit, and a story. Similarly, if it had debuted to Concord levels of Day 1 engagement, then that too would be a slam dunk flop, end of story. The truth is, it's not at either end of the spectrum, and so I personally am just in the camp of waiting to see how all of this shakes out, and honestly, cheering for it to succeed. I didn't love my time with the Server Slam, but I will play more of it when I'm back from GDC. Regardless of what I personally end up thinking about Marathon, Bungie is one of my favorite studios ever, and I really want them to be successful, so I hope that Marathon finds whatever audience size it needs to in order for the studio to remain strong and sustainable into the future. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about Marathon in the weeks and months that follow, so all I say for now is that we need to pace ourselves. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Oh boy. Let's kick over to the lightning round now with this rather surprising news. The Financial Times reports that the White House is debating whether to allow Tencent to keep its stake in major video game groups as Trump prepares to meet with President Xi Jinping in China in April. Citing several people in the know, top officials have apparently held internal meetings to assess whether Tencent's investment in US and Finnish gaming firms poses a national security risk. On the US side, they own Riot Games and Turtle Rock, the studio behind co-op zombie shooter Back 4 Blood that ended support a few years ago now, with no word on what they're working on next. Tencent also has a major 35% 20% stake in Epic Games, a 38% stake in mobile developer Pocket Gems, as well as a minor stake in both Discord and Roblox. Then on the Finnish side, they have a majority stake in Supercell, the studio behind one of the most popular mobile games, Clash of Clans, as well as a 14% stake in Remedy. As for when we might find out if they go through with it, a meeting was scheduled on the 4th of March but was postponed due to scheduling issues, so we'll keep you posted. Automaton reports that Square Enix has shut down a Japanese aggregate news blog over the harassment of Final Fantasy XIV staff. It wasn't disclosed exactly what the blog had said, only that their posts were disparaging towards Square Enix staff, and so after the studio requested the identity of the site's anonymous administrator, the blog has been shut down, an apology issued, and a settlement for an undisclosed amount paid. In their apology, the blog's admin wrote that they, quote, deeply regret the inconvenience and burden that some articles posted on it caused to Square Enix and their affiliates. After discussion between the parties, we have decided to close this blog, end quote. But that wasn't the only case of this happening. Just a day later, Automaton went on to report that another Japanese news blog had announced they were shutting down, with its administrator also issuing an apology to Final Fantasy XIV's development and management teams. Their statement reads, quote, having reconsidered the weight of responsibility involved in disseminating information online, I've decided to draw a line under this matter in my own way. To all the Final Fantasy XIV development and operations staff whom I inconvenienced, I sincerely apologize, end quote. The war on loot boxes isn't over, it seems, as New York State Attorney General Letitia James has taken aim at CSGO skin cases, looking to sue Valve over loot box practices that, quote, lead to serious addiction problems, especially for our young people. The loot box model that Valve has developed, charging an individual for a chance to win something of value based on luck alone, is quintessential gambling, prohibited under New York's constitution and penal law, end quote. New York State had requested that Valve, quote, make full restitution to consumers and pay damages caused, and also disgorge all monies resulting from the illegal practices alleged herein, end quote. Given how long-running this issue has been, and given how expensive it'd be for Valve to meet these demands, I suspect this court case is going to drag on for quite some time. But wouldn't it be cool if gambling in video games was banned and developers had to make money the old-fashioned way by charging $10,000 for a knife skin instead of gambling for it? Just the way Todd intended when he invented horse armor all those years ago. According to VGC, Clint Hocking, the creative director of the next mainline Assassin's Creed entry codename Hex, has left Ubisoft. VGC cited an internal meeting held by the new leadership team for the Assassin's Creed franchise, reporting that Jean Guaitasson, the franchise's new head of content and previous creative director on Black Flag and Origins, would take Hocking's place. Ubisoft says their farewells in a statement that reads, quote, we sincerely thank Clint for his vision, creative contributions, and dedication over the years, and we wish him the very best in his next chapter. Development on Assassin's Creed codename Hex continues with a seasoned team. The game will deliver something distinctive within the Assassin's Creed franchise, end quote. Soon after this, Ubisoft issued a press release that finally confirmed the existence of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, the remake of the best Assassin's Creed game, full stop. Personally, I think the reveal could have been done with a little more fanfare than just a simple press release, so I hope we get a first look at actual gameplay real soon. A fair bit of layoff news this week, beginning with Halfbrick. This is the Australian-based mobile developer behind some of the most successful mobile titles, such as Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride, and who more recently put out Bluey's Quest for the Golden Pen, which, yeah, probably didn't pop off like those prior games. The studio broke the news via LinkedIn saying, quote, Halfbrick is making changes to our team structure, including role redundancies in Australia and the conclusion of a number of engagements internationally. Like many studios, we are navigating a challenging period for the games industry, and we've had to make some hard choices about how we move forward, end quote. Mobile Gamer Biz reported that the studio has cut 41 staff, a huge reduction of the approximately 100 people that Halfbrick was employing. This next one was meant for last week, but we couldn't quite fit it into the show. Amazon Game Studios has ended its publishing agreement with UK developer Maverick Games, according to reports from the game business. This was the studio founded in 2022 by numerous former Forza Horizon developers, including former Forza Horizon creative director Mike Brown. This announcement comes days after Amazon published party platformer King of Meat announced that it will be shutting down, raising concerns that the upcoming Tomb Raider game might also be on the chopping block, though Amazon is reportedly going ahead with that one. Maverick Games were supposedly working on a narrative-led open-world driving game, but I guess the future prospects for that thing are up in the air now. A shame given how great the Forza Horizon games are, and we could definitely use more games sharing that space. Also from last week, the announcement that Full Circle Studio, the developer of Skate, would also begin laying off an undisclosed number of staff, and it appears to include many senior developers. The EA subsidiary said it was, quote, reshaping Full Circle to better support Skate's long-term future, end quote. But I don't know, maybe they could have used those staff to focus on reshaping the game, considering the poor decisions that have been going on over there. The game has recently drawn ire for changing its stance on the monetization of its content. Prior to launch, they said they were would never lock any areas behind a paywall, yet just days before this layoff, they released an update that restricted access to a new part of the open world to only those who have paid for its battle pass. Just days after announcing its next showcase, publisher Nacon has filed for insolvency after majority shareholder Big Ben Interactive failed to make partial repayment on its bond loan. The publisher has since decided that, quote, its available assets do not allow it to meet its due liabilities and is requesting the opening of judicial reorganization proceedings, end quote. Nacon is home to studios like Rogue Factor, Teon, Big Ant Studios, and Daedalic Entertainment, but you know them as the publisher for the well-received mystery action game Hell Is Us, RoboCop, Rogue City, and who can forget the Golem game. As a result of all of this, Nacon has postponed their Nacon Connect showcase to May this year. And finally, it's live adaptation season, it seems, as Variety has revealed the cast for the Life is Strange Prime Video series. It's set to star Maisie Stella and Tatum Grace Hopkins as Chloe and Max respectively. Maybe it's an age thing, but I have no idea who either of these people are, though that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm always down to see some new faces on screen, and they certainly look the part. This show will be a pretty faithful adaptation, it seems. The official logline says that it follows Max, quote, a photography student who discovers she can rewind time while saving the life of her childhood best friend Chloe. As she struggles to understand this new skill, the pair investigates the mysterious disappearance of a fellow student, uncovering a dark side to their town that will ultimately force them to make an impossible life or death choice that will impact them forever, end quote. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, last Friday was a big one for the Pokémon company as it marked the franchise's actual 30th birthday. And to celebrate, they held a Pokémon Presents, which was basically the same kind of fare as every other Pokémon Presents. Updates for their live service games, some bits and pieces about their TCG and esports stuff, but there were a couple of special extras thrown in there too. One of them was the release window for Pokémon Champions, the battle-focused spin-off coming to Switch and mobile. It's coming out April for Switch and later in the year for iOS and Android. They also announced that Pokémon Gale of Darkness for GameCube is coming to Nintendo Switch Online. I'm told that one is just okay. The biggest announcement, of course, was the next mainline game in the Pokémon series, Wind and Waves. This will be the 10th generation of Pokémon game, meaning an all-new set of creatures that take the Pokémon count far past the 1,000 number. The trailer gave us a look at the new starters, Angry Bird, the Pomeranian from Ghost Trick, and some kind of cute lizard, I don't know. As well as the new open world region. It's currently unnamed, but they hinted at underwater exploration, and they're clearly taking great inspiration from Southeast Asia. Also, those two Pikachu are married, probably. Due out in 2027 and will be a Switch 2 exclusive, and I gotta say, you can see some visual uplift here as a result of leaving the Switch 1 behind, something that was desperately needed after how Pokemon ZA looked. Along with that delay into 2027, I'm hoping that Game Freak are turning over a new leaf and dragging this franchise into the modern era. One can only hope. Moving from something expected to unexpected, the folks at Surgeon Studios have once again got another game coming out, and once again, it's very, very different to the Metroidvania and horror game they've already put out. This one's called Fix Force, and it's a PC-only co-op game about robots fixing buildings in a colorful post-apocalypse and then extracting out of there. This one's launching into early access on March 12th. Last week, we had Scott Pilgrim. Before that, we had Marvel Cosmic Invasion, and before that, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Shredder's Revenge. It seems like modern retro beat-em-ups are an absolute given for any millennial IP, and this one's no exception. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Dragon Pearl of Destruction is one hell of a name, and this is the next one from Bitmap Bureau, who did Terminator 2D No Fate last year, and they just announced a release date for April 28th for this one. Seems very quick after the release of the Terminator game last year. I don't know how they're turning them around this quick, but good luck to them. While we're talking about the past, remember Guitar Hero? Two companies made that legendary game back in the day. One was Harmonix, which went on to make Rock Band and then got acquired by Epic to make Fortnite Festival, and the other was peripheral manufacturer Red Octane, who made the actual plastic guitars. They were acquired by Activision and got shut down in 2010 once the craze had died down, but they've since reformed and are making plastic guitars again, but they're also trying their hand at making their own spiritual successor to the game. It's called Stage Tour, and they announced it last week, and it's due sometime before mid-2026 on PC and consoles. Ed on our team still plays these rhythm games pretty religiously, so I asked him what he thought of this one. He just kind of scrunched up his face and said, we'll see. Alright, so what came out last week? Oh boy, if you haven't heard all the talk about Resident Evil Requiem yet, then life must be very peaceful for you in whatever cave you're living in. You can find my review for this one on the channel. I'll leave a link to it below the like button. But Capcom didn't let us go into this one too much, wanting reviewers to preserve a lot of the surprises so that everybody else could spoil the surprises over the first few days. Good plan, Capcom. But by all the early metrics, it's done very well for itself both commercially and critically so far. On OpenCritic, it's hit that fabled mighty 90, even with a few outliers at the bottom end. Eurogamer was one of the many publications that gave this one a full score with 5 out of 5 stars. Matt Wales wrote, quote, "Is Requiem uneven? Absolutely. Does it eventually slightly run out of steam? I think that's fair criticism too. But carried away on a wave of increasing nostalgia, I didn't especially care. In a way, Capcom's deliberate and impressively cohesive grab bag approach to Requiem almost makes it impervious to criticism, and you might as well just sit back and enjoy the ride. And with 30 years of brilliant, ludicrous nonsense squashed down into a single game, this well-earned victory lap is one hell of a time, end quote. There was one big challenger to Grace and Leon's throne last week, and it's a protagonist wearing a huge vacant grin on its face at all times. That's right, I'm talking about the human ditto monstrosity that leads Pokemon Pocopia, which has become the highest rated Pokemon game of all time. And it's not even made by Game Freak. To be fair though, Pocopia is a very different game. It's a life simulator first and foremost, but as I said in my preview last month, it's done a bunch of really smart things to make the whole experience just a lot more pleasant than you might be expecting if you've bounced off games like Animal Crossing like I did. A mighty 88 for this one over on OpenCritic, with GameSpot giving it a 9 out of 10 and comparing it favorably in contrast to its clearest influences in Animal Crossing and Dragon Quest Builders. Quote, Animal Crossing is so focused on building community that there isn't much to do once you finish your daily chores, while Dragon Quest Builders relies heavily on story quests without much incentive to build up your community and socialize. Pokemon Pocopia gives you a massive amount to do and a story that propels you forward, while also letting you enjoy the simple pleasure of living among your Pokemon friends and building your perfect community, end quote. Hopping over to another weird mashup of genres and franchises, Reigns The Witcher is Devolver's wild attempt to translate the world to a swipe-controlled roguelike strategy management game, and it's managed to land itself a strong 76 on OpenCritic with a small range of opinions on it. PC gamers seem to like this one, but landed at a 65, bringing up a common gripe with the Reigns series and roguelikes in general. Sometimes you get a really great and inventive run, and sometimes you get one where nothing good happens at all. They ultimately describe it as, quote, a casual time waster for people who are into The Witcher enough to get the references, but not married to the idea that every Witcher game has to be a big RPG, end quote. Now here's one I was quite curious about, Spellcasters Chronicles. This is the third-person MOBA from Quantic Dream, the studio who has only ever made cinematic narrative games, and somehow they thought it'd be a good idea to launch this early access phase of their live service game on the same weekend as the Marathon Service Slam and RE Requiem's launch. As a result, this one has not been looking so hot after its first week. With a peak Steam concurrent player count of 888 people, user reception has been mixed so far with just over 400 reviews, but it certainly has its fans. Like we said in our preview, the overall sentiment seems to be that it has some interesting ideas, but it's not very well optimized at all, and it obviously needs a more active player base. Will it get it? I don't know, man. I certainly don't have a good feeling about this one. Oh look, another one of those millennial-coded retro beat-em-ups, and this time it's Scott Pilgrim EX. Reviews for this one dropped on Wednesday, and it too has done a decent enough job, landing at an 82 on OpenCritic. Very little spread in the scores, actually. This one seems to be getting 7s, 8s across the boards, with the occasional 9 peppered in from particularly happy campers. PC Gamer scored it a 76 and said, quote, Scott Pilgrim EX is a palatable, fresh helping of retro beatdown goodness, but it's too brief and easygoing to deliver more fun than its inspirations or best contemporaries, end quote. While Jewel Shockers scored this one 9 out of 10 and said, quote, ultimately it's the perfect kind of beat 'em up for a pizza night with friends, and this one even comes with a bit of extra spice to make things even more interesting. The only major downside is that its main story is too short, and I finished wanting even more, end quote. One more for this week, and it's Planet of Lana 2, the sequel to the very good atmospheric platformer from a couple of years ago. This one's done quite well for itself too, it seems, sitting on a mighty 84 on OpenCritic with very little spread. The gamer gave it 4 out of 5 stars, saying, quote, Planet of Lana 2, Children of the Leaf builds on the delightful world that the first game whisked us away to, and delivers yet another beautiful and touching tale. It raises the bar when it comes to puzzles and challenges, while giving us some much anticipated answers as to where Moi came from and the more technologically advanced society that existed in the ancient past, end quote. Alright, so what's coming out this week? Well, we'll start with a quick shout out to Songs of Conquest, an indie game which is carrying the legacy of Heroes of Might and Magic in a big way, since Ubisoft don't really seem to know what to do with it, palming it off to a third-party publisher and all. They released a big piece of DLC last week called Rise Eternal, which adds new maps and story missions, as well as a touch of necromancy for good measure. If you like Heroes of Might and Magic and you haven't tried this yet, I really do recommend it to you. It's great. It's a pretty quiet week otherwise until next week, March 12th. The biggest one for a bunch of you is Ghost of Yotei Legends, the free multiplayer update that continues what was a surprising but very good addition to Tsushima. PS5 only for this one, obviously. Joining that one is John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, a new co-op FPS from Saber Interactive in the vein of something like Left 4 Dead, but modeled around the style of legendary horror director and notable Destiny 2 tragic John Carpenter. No idea how much of his influence is actually in this one. We'll find out next week. PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles for this one. If you need a bit more of a hardcore horror experience, then you might be pleased to know that Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly Remake is also coming that same day. Very different vibe here. This Japanese psychological horror game originally came out on the PS2 and made a really strong impression. So strong that they remade it twice. The first remake was on a Wii, and this new one will be out on PC, PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and the Switch. One for the Italians now. 1348 Ex Voto is a AA cinematic narrative action game set in medieval Italy, developed by a new outfit called Sedlio, and it's boasting a historically accurate-ish combat system. This one was announced a while back at Gamescom last year and stars stage actor Abby Baldwin along with Jennifer English. Previews for the Steam Next Fest demo seemed promising, but noted it was a bit rough around the edges. PC, PS5, and Xbox Series for this one. Staying with AA now, the second Greedfall game from Nacon developer Spiders also launches out of its early access period on Thursday. Rough timing given the state of the publisher, but on the upside, the most recent reviews seem to be more positive than they were when it first launched back in the day. It's an RPG set in 17th century Europe where choices and consequences are designed to be the main hook. Finally, Thursday also brings the latest entry in 2K's WWE franchise for PC, PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and Switch 2, but I don't know shit about wrestling, so I'll instead end on the mighty Ball X Pit, which is launching on mobile on the same day and will absolutely suplex your life. Okay, turns out I know at least one thing about wrestling. Now, this next one was a game we left off of last week's release list because we wanted to talk about it during this week's show in this segment, and to be honest, we're not at all surprised to see the reviews this one has landed, so put this on your radar. This is Esoteric Ebb, and if you're thinking it looks just like a fantasy version of Disco Elysium, well, you're not alone there. It's actually made by a developer named Christoph Bogard, who basically just wanted to mix together ideas from his favorite CRPGs like Planescape Torment and Disco Elysium, and then make it funny. It's the kind of game that offers a staggering amount of freedom that also makes you feel like you're pushing the boundaries of a tabletop experience, but in the oddest, most bizarre and humorous way possible. Conversation is a huge part of the game, obviously, as are the great writing and dice rolls that determine your fate, but the bright colors and comedy is what makes this one really stand out. This one's being published by Raw Fury, and for real, you have to hand it to them for picking this up, and Sales of Blake Manor and Blueprints. These guys certainly know how to pick them. Not many outlets have reviewed this one, but it has landed at a mighty 88 on OpenCritic nonetheless. So if you do love intricate CRPGs and a few laughs, you can head over to our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Our feel-good story for the week is a really nice one, actually. Meet Rob Wiethoff. He's the voice actor behind John Marsden, the protagonist of Red Dead Redemption 1, and believe it or not, despite voicing the legendary character, Rob has never actually played through and completed the entire game. 16 years after its initial release, he chose to live stream his first ever complete playthrough, and as the credits rolled, he found himself overcome with emotion by the enormity of the effort that goes into a project like this. Seeing all the names rolling through and reflecting on what their work meant to his life, he couldn't help but get a little wistful, a little philosophical even, especially as the screen fades to black and it becomes clear, to him at least, that the journey was over. The thing is though, that's not exactly how most of these open world games work. Take a look.
I don't know what I did right. I don't know if I was living right or just happened to win the lottery or whatever. However you want to say it. I don't know that there is a way to fully understand it or express it, no matter who you are. But is that? I think that might be it. What? What?
Alright, let's go. Time to get the 100%. We're gonna go for the full completion of the game.
Alright, ladies and gents, that is another show down, and a big one, come to think of it. Highguard shuts down, Sony exits the PC category, while Xbox confirms that its next console is in fact a PC, and Nintendo released a Pokémon game that was not only not bad, it was like one of the highest rated games of the year. Incredible scenes all round, and as always, we appreciate you being here while we cover it all. So to celebrate, give yourself a like by giving this video a like. That's totally how it works, and if you haven't already subscribed and ding the notification bell, then be sure to do that too. Don't expect too much from me for the next little while, as I'll be traveling to GDC next week, but when I'm back, we've got Crimson Desert and Marathon and so much more, so plenty to look forward to. For now though, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video sponsor, Squarespace. Do you run your own business, or do you want to? If so, a website is really helpful, and there's no better or easier way to build a website than Squarespace. Let's say, for example, you have a store that sells stuff, I don't know, clothes, shoes, furniture, cell phones, whatever. That store exists in just one spot, and you're probably only able to service your local area, but what if you could tap into a much bigger market? What if you had a website that lets customers find you no matter where they are? What if they could see your inventory online and make purchases? And what if you had a website that could facilitate all of that seamlessly? Well, that's exactly what Squarespace does. Squarespace lets you build professional-looking websites in minutes. You just select from their extensive list of pre-built templates, customize those templates to your heart's desire, and boom, an incredible-looking website that looks like it costs thousands of dollars to build, when in reality, you did it all yourself. That's just the front end, whereas business owners are going to be equally interested in the back end. Squarespace provides intuitive tools for inventory management, customized shipping options and label printing, simple payment solutions through platforms like PayPal and Stripe, and detailed analytics so you can track how well business is going. There's even award-winning customer support on hand to assist you should you ever get stuck or just need some advice. It's an easy-to-use end-to-end solution that could change your life, to be honest. A website is one of the best ways to get yourself or your business out there, so if you're thinking about kicking off something new, either personally or professionally, a website is certainly going to be a great step in that process. If you want to get started, then visit squarespace.com to start building your website through their free trial. And if you want to get serious, then use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for a 10% discount off your purchase of a website or a domain name. Thanks very much to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.